Picture this. You wake up every morning, shuffle to the kitchen, pour yourself a hot cup of coffee, and wash down your blood pressure pill before the day even begins. You have been doing this faithfully for years. Your doctor seems satisfied with your numbers. Your family thinks you are on top of it, and deep down you feel like you are doing everything right. But what if the very routine you built to protect your heart is leaving it exposed during the most dangerous window of the entire day? I'm not talking about a minor timing inconvenience. I'm talking about a 45% difference in cardiovascular death, a number pulled from a landmark study involving nearly 20,000 patients followed over 6 years. And the tragedy is that most people taking blood pressure medication right now have never been told any of this, not because their doctors do not care, but because the 15-minute appointment was never long enough to cover it. Today, we are going to fix that. There are 5 specific mistakes that patients on blood pressure medication make every single day, mistakes involving when they take their pills, what they take them with, and what happens when a dose gets missed. By the time we finish, you will have a clear, actionable picture of exactly what to change and exactly what to ask your doctor at your next visit. Let us start with something your body does every single night while you sleep. Something most people on blood pressure medication have never heard of, and something that determines whether your medication is actually working when you need it most. Your cardiovascular system does not run on a flat line. It operates on a biological rhythm called the circadian clock, and blood pressure is one of its most precisely governed variables. In healthy adults, blood pressure naturally drops between 10 and 20% during sleep. This is called nocturnal dipping, and it is one of the ways your body repairs and recovers overnight. But then, beginning around 4 in the morning and accelerating through 10 a.m., your blood pressure surges sharply upward. Cortisol rises, your sympathetic nervous system activates, your heart rate increases. Your body is preparing you for the demands of the waking day. This surge is called the morning surge. And here is the number that should stop every cardiologist in their tracks. Research published. Aid in the journal. Hypertension identified this window as responsible for 49% of all strokes and 40% of all heart attacks that occur within any given 24-hour period. Not throughout the day, within that single morning window. And as we age past 60, arterial walls stiffen, losing up to 30% of their elasticity, which makes that surge more dangerous, not less, because stiffer arteries cannot absorb the pressure, spike the way younger, more flexible vessels can. Now here is where timing matters more than most people realize. If you take your blood pressure medication at 7 or 8 in the morning, it absorbs over the next 1 to 2 hours and reaches its peak concentration somewhere, around 9 or 10 a.m., right as the morning surge is already subsiding. By 4 or 5 o'clock the following morning, when the next surge is building again, your medication has been declining in concentration for 18 to 20 hours. The window during which your cardiovascular system is most vulnerable is precisely when your medication is at its weakest. A bedtime dose changes that equation entirely. Take your medication at 10 p.m., and by 4 a.m. it is at or near its peak concentration. It is fully active during the morning surge. Your arteries are protected at exactly the moment they are most at risk. This is the logic behind what is now known as chronotherapy, the science of aligning medical treatment with the body's natural biological rhythms, and the clinical evidence behind it is substantial. The HIA chronotherapy trial, the largest study ever conducted specifically on blood pressure medication timing, enrolled 19,084 adults with confirmed hypertension and followed them for a median of 6 years. The patients who took their antihypertensive medication at bedtime showed a 45% lower risk of cardiovascular death, heart attack, heart failure, and stroke compared to those who took it in the morning. That number was published in the European Heart Journal. And yet, the default instruction on most blood pressure prescriptions still reads, take once daily in the morning. A retired opera singer I once worked with, she had been taking her lisinopril every morning at 8 a.m. for 11 years. Her office blood pressure readings looked perfectly acceptable. But when her cardiologist ordered a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor, the data told a completely different story. Between 5 and 7 every morning, her blood pressure was surging to 162 over 94. She was, as I often describe it, controlled at the wrong time of day. We switched her to bedtime dosing. 3 months later, her ambulatory monitoring showed complete suppression of the morning surge. Her cardiologist told her that her cardiovascular data looked better than it had in more than a decade. She looked at me and said, I wish someone had told me this 11 years ago. Now, I owe you a complete picture here. The HIA chronotherapy trial has faced methodological scrutiny from some researchers. A subsequent large study in the United Kingdom, involving over 21,000 patients, did not find a statistically significant difference between morning and bedtime dosing and cardiovascular outcomes. The science is not fully settled. What is settled is this: bedtime dosing has not been shown to cause harm. And for patients with what we call non-dipping blood pressure, patterns where blood pressure fails to fall properly during sleep, bedtime dosing may offer substantial benefit. The only reliable way to know whether you fall into that category is to ask your physician for a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor. That single test maps your full circadian blood pressure pattern and gives your doctor the information needed to truly personalize your treatment. It is the most powerful tool available for this purpose, and most patients with hypertension have never had one. If you switch to bedtime dosing, take your medication roughly 30 minutes before you lie down, rather than after you are already in bed. This allows proper initial absorption. Consistency of timing matters just as much as the timing itself, so pair it with a fixed part of your nighttime routine. Brushing your teeth, setting your alarm, whatever anchors that time reliably. Now let us talk about your morning coffee, because this one surprises people, and it matters more than most doctors will ever tell you during a routine visit. If you are taking a beta blocker, medications like metoprolol, atenolol, or carvedilol, your morning coffee may be working directly against your prescription. To understand why, think of your sympathetic nervous system as a gas pedal. Caffeine presses it. It raises your heart rate, triggers adrenaline release, and temporarily spikes blood pressure. Beta blockers work by blocking that exact mechanism, slowing the heart rate and reducing the force of each contraction. When you take your beta blocker and drink your coffee within the same 30-minute window, you're pressing the accelerator and the brake simultaneously inside your cardiovascular system. In most patients, the medication ultimately wins that tug of war. But in patients with a history of arrhythmia or irregular heartbeat, the competition between caffeine's stimulating effects and the medication's suppressive effects can trigger palpitations during caffeine's peak absorption window, roughly 30 to 60 minutes after your first cup. Cardiovascular research tracking over 3,400 patients on beta blockers across 4 years found that those who consumed more than 2 cups of coffee within 60 minutes of taking their dose had a 22% higher incidence of symptomatic palpitations compared to patients who spaced their coffee at least 45 minutes after dosing. I had a patient, a retired school teacher from Louisiana, 68 years old, who had been on metoprolol for 3 years and was coming to me complaining of a fluttering sensation in her chest every morning around 9 o'clock. She was convinced it was anxiety. When we went through her daily routine together, the picture became clear. Coffee at 7:30, pill at 7:45. We shifted her pill to 7 and pushed her coffee back to 7:50. The palpitations resolved within 2 weeks. She asked me, "Why did no one ever ask what time I had my coffee?" I did not have a satisfying answer for her. The rule is simple. If you take any beta blocker, wait a minimum of 45 minutes between your medication and your first cup of coffee. Decaffeinated coffee carries no significant interaction. And regardless of which blood pressure medication you take, pairing your pill with a full glass of water helps absorption remain consistent and reduces the concentration spikes that drive interactions. Here's the next thing most people do not know about grapefruit. And this one is more dangerous than it sounds, because the window of risk is far wider than people expect. Grapefruit and grapefruit juice contain natural compounds called furanocoumarins. Think of your digestive system as having a security checkpoint, a specific enzyme called CYP3A4 that regulates how much of a given drug actually enters your bloodstream. Furanocoumarins disable that checkpoint, and they do not disable it briefly. They effectively block CYP3A4 for up to 72 hours after consumption. When that enzyme is blocked, calcium channel blockers, medications, including felodipine, nifedipine, and amlodipine, are not processed normally. Blood levels of the drug can rise to 2, 3, sometimes 5 times the intended concentration. The result is an exaggerated drop in blood pressure, dizziness, lightheadedness, and in older adults who already have reduced vascular tone, dangerous fainting episodes. Researchers at the University of Toronto's Clinical Pharmacology Unit tracked this interaction across nearly 2,900 patients over 3 years. Those who consumed grapefruit products within 72 hours of dosing had a 31% higher rate of hypotensive episodes, dangerously low blood pressure events, compared to those who avoided grapefruit entirely. I want to tell you about a retired electrician from Arizona, 72 years old, who had been taking amlodipine for 2 years with absolutely no issues. His wife started buying a new citrus juice blend at the grocery store. He did not read the label. It included grapefruit. 3 mornings later, he stood up from the breakfast table and collapsed. There was no cardiac event. His blood pressure had dropped to 86/52. When I pieced together what had happened, the grapefruit was the unmistakable culprit. If you take any calcium channel blocker, ask your pharmacist directly. Is grapefruit a concern with my specific medication? Do not assume the answer is no, for all calcium. Channel blockers, avoid grapefruit products entirely. Replace them with orange juice, apple juice, or water. The interaction window extends well past a single morning, which is why patients who had grapefruit juice on Tuesday are still at risk when they take their pill on Thursday. A note on nutrition. Magnesium-rich foods, spinach, almonds, pumpkin seeds, taken alongside a calcium channel blocker, may help support healthy vascular tone without interacting with the medication. If you are on long-term calcium channel blocker therapy, it is worth asking your physician about checking your magnesium levels. Now, here's a timing mistake that does not announce itself as a cardiovascular problem. It announces itself as insomnia. It announces itself as a bathroom trip at 2 in the morning. It announces itself as something people chalk up to simply getting older. Diuretics, commonly called water pills, are among the most frequently prescribed components of blood pressure treatment. Medications like hydrochlorothiazide, furosemide, and chlorthalidone work by prompting your kidneys to excrete more fluid. Less fluid volume means less pressure on arterial walls. Think of it as partially draining a pressurized garden hose. The timing problem arises when patients take their diuretic in the late afternoon or evening, often because they forgot a morning dose. The rule here is absolute. If you take a diuretic, take it before 10 in the morning. If you take a twice daily diuretic, the second dose should be no later than 2 p.m. Write this down and put it somewhere you will see it. Pair your morning diuretic with a banana or a small serving of plain yogurt. Diuretics can deplete potassium over time, and natural dietary potassium helps support a healthy heart rhythm. The last mistake is one that almost everyone has made, and for certain medications, it carries risks that most patients would never expect. You forget your morning pill. You remember it 2 in the afternoon, or at dinner, or just before bed. And the instinct, the completely understandable, very human instinct, is to take 2 tonight to make up for it. For some medications, this approach is relatively low risk. For others, it can trigger a cardiovascular emergency. The medications most important to understand here are calcium channel blockers and long-acting RBs, medications such as valsartan or olmesartan. Think of your arterial system as a network of flexible tubes under constant pressure. These medications work by relaxing the muscular walls of those tubes, reducing resistance and lowering blood pressure. 1 dose does this gradually and safely. 2 doses at once can create a sudden, steep reduction in vascular resistance. Blood pressure can drop sharply and rapidly. In a younger adult with elastic, responsive arteries, the body often compensates. In an adult over 65 with reduced vascular tone and possibly some degree of existing coronary artery disease, that sudden pressure drop can cause syncope, fainting, and in some cases insufficient blood flow to the heart or brain. There is a quieter version of this same mistake that is just as dangerous. Patients who are prescribed twice daily medications begin taking them only once daily because it is simply easier to remember without informing their physician. The blood pressure appears partially controlled. Office readings look acceptable. The doctor sees acceptable numbers. But the twice daily protection the medication was designed to provide is running at half capacity, and cardiovascular events that could have been prevented are not. Johns Hopkins researchers tracked over 8,000 patients with hypertension across 5 years. Those with documented dose doubling events after missed doses had a 38% higher incidence of emergency hypertensive crises. Patients who inconsistently took twice daily medications had a 26% higher rate of cardiovascular hospitalization compared to those who remained compliant with their prescribed regimen. A contractor I once worked with, 66 years old, had been taking amlodipine and valsartan for 4 years. He worked irregular hours. His mornings were unpredictable. Over time, he developed a habit of taking 2 plumpasum LS in the evening whenever he remembered missing his morning dose. His wife found him unconscious on the kitchen floor. His blood pressure had dropped to 79/48. No heart attack, no stroke. A completely preventable double-dose episode. The protocol is this. If you miss a dose and remember later that same day, take it as soon as you remember, unless your next scheduled dose is less than 4 hours away. If you are approaching your next dose window, skip the missed dose entirely and return to your normal schedule. Never double a dose without first calling your pharmacist, because the correct answer depends entirely on the specific medication you're taking. Your pharmacist can tell you in under 2 minutes what the right approach is for your exact prescription. The most effective tool against missed doses is behavioral pairing. Set a daily phone alarm labeled with the name of your medication, and link that alarm to a specific anchor in your day, your first meal, brushing your teeth, making your morning coffee. A UCLA medication adherence study published in 2019 found that behavioral pairing reduced missed doses by 63%. That is a significant return for something that costs nothing. Here is what I want to leave you with, because I think it matters beyond the specifics. The fact that blood pressure medications exist, that we can chemically intervene in one of the body's most essential biological rhythms and reduce the risk of stroke and heart attack by 30, 40, even 45%, is one of the genuine achievements of modern medicine. You're not failing because you take medication. You're using a tool, and like any tool, how you use it matters just as much as whether you use it at all. Aging is a biological process. Some aspects of it are inevitable. But the morning surge your arteries face every day, the timing windows your medication needs to cover, the interactions hiding in your morning coffee or grapefruit juice, the dangerous gap created by an evening diuretic. These are not destiny, they are variables, and variables can be managed with knowledge. Before your next appointment, write down 5 questions. What is the ideal time of day to take each of my blood pressure medications? Would a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor give us better information about my circadian pattern? Does my medication interact with caffeine or grapefruit? Should I avoid any foods or beverages within an hour of dosing? And if I miss a dose, what is the right protocol for my specific medication? Those 5 questions, asked in a single appointment, may do more to protect your heart over the next decade than anything that can be adjusted on a prescription pad. The information is yours to have. The conversation is yours to start. There is something I want to say directly to you, because I think it gets lost in the clinical details. Every person watching this is managing something, a prescription they have been taking for years without questioning it, a concern they carry quietly, because they do not want to seem like they are overreacting. A body that does not always behave the way it once did, and a medical system that does not always have the time to explain why. You deserve better than a handwritten prescription and a send-off. You deserve to understand what that medication is actually doing inside your body when it works best, what interferes with it, and what happens if the routine slips. That is not specialized knowledge reserved for cardiologists. That is basic information every patient should have from the moment they are handed that first prescription bottle. The 5 things we covered today: bedtime dosing and the morning surge, coffee timing and beta blockers, the 72-hour grapefruit window for calcium channel blockers, the nighttime fall risk from late diuretics, and the dangers of doubling a missed dose. None of these require a medical degree to understand or act on. They require information, and that is exactly what so many patients are not getting in the current system. Here is a practical action you can take today, not at your next appointment, not when you get around to it. Today. Look at the medication bottles in your cabinet. Read the label on each one. Note whether it says morning or once daily without further guidance. Then, before your next dose, spend 5 minutes searching the name of that medication alongside the words best time to take and food interactions. You will very much likely find information that changes something about your routine. Then bring what you found to your doctor and ask whether it applies to your specific case and your specific history. Blood pressure management is not a passive experience. It is not something that happens to you when you swallow a pill on autopilot every morning. It is an active partnership between what medicine provides and what you understand about your own body. The patients who do best with hypertension over the long term are not necessarily the ones with the most aggressive prescriptions. They are the ones who understand what they are taking, why the timing matters, and what to watch for when something feels off.